and welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grace. Today, we are going to talk about hiring, something that almost all of us will do at some point within our career. So I am joined by an expert in the field, Rick Girard. He's the founder and CEO of Stride Search Incorporated. They're an engaged search firm. They're available on the web if you want to stalk them while you're listening at stridesearch.com. He's extremely passionate about helping startup founders find a win-win with the strongest hires to fuel unprecedented company growth. He's the author of a really cool book called Healing Career Wounds. We're going to talk a little bit about his book. We're going to talk a little bit about his philosophy around hiring and recruiting and where HR and recruiting kind of fit and don't fit. It's going to be a very cool discussion. He invented and systemized the hiring operating system, or HireOS, the solution for leaders to win the strongest hires by blowing up best practices with a humanistic, evidence-driven, non-biased, and time-efficient experience. When he's not running a school for gifted mutants, I love this part of his intro, so pay attention to this. When not running a school for gifted mutants as Professor X, Rick hosts the Higher Power radio show and podcast. That link will also be down below. A weekly series on LinkedIn Live, which serves as a business leader's resource to solve their most difficult hiring challenges. He competes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, has an affinity for any adrenaline-pumping activities such as being on the Tech Pro Unicorn podcast, surfing, snowboarding, rock climbing, and running with scissors. Are they flaming scissors?
Yeah, why not, right?
All right.
By the way,
cool.
This is Michael. This is the most dangerous thing. This is way more dangerous than running with scissors being on your podcast.
I'm telling you, you never know. What goes on to the internet stays on the internet, right?
So they say. I don't know.
Well, Rick, thank you for taking the time and joining me here on the podcast.
Michael, thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Cool. So Rick and I were just talking before we kind of started the recording. We're talking a little bit of just getting to know each other. And, I said, we as consultants, we are in the HR space of companies an awful lot. And, we spend time in two areas mostly. That's recruiting and then benefits. So we're not going to talk about benefits because, benefits are benefits. But I do want to talk about recruiting. And I said, recruiting is always part of HR. And Rick was like, oh, yeah, that's not good. And so I'd love your thoughts on why recruiting maybe should be separated from a typical HR organization.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, like a lot of tech companies, they've split it out, right? So they, and quite frankly, I have a lot of friends who are in HR. They don't like the recruiting side. Like they would love to do benefits and compliance and all those things. I've met very, very few HR professionals who like recruiting, but it gets put under that umbrella a lot of times, and it's their responsibility. And so, like, why not? It's recruiters and HR people are kind of two totally different types of people. And so, when you have a reporting structure that's like that, it doesn't necessarily make sense. I think it should be more the responsibility of operations, more so than HR.
I like that approach. I mean, if you think about a recruiter, they're almost in sales, right?
Yeah.
They're almost like a hunter that has to go out and find the people, and then they have to sell them as much on the company as they do go out and find the right talent. So I've never heard anyone kind of put it like that, but once you say it, it makes total sense.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to work with a lot of smaller companies like startups where they don't even have an HR department yet, right? So like it filters, basically to the CEO, and it's the CEO's responsibility. And when you're a small company, the other thing that I see quite often is, like the CEO can't wait to get rid of that responsibility, right? Like so many CEOs, I meet so few CEOs to say, I love hiring. It's like the best thing in the world. It's always, I hate hiring. I'm terrible at it. And I can't wait until we get enough money. I can hire a recruiter and hand that off to somebody else. And man, that to me is scary because, as the CEO of a company, if you're a startup founder, you need to be the best recruiter in the company. And, it's something I think every every entrepreneur and every business leader needs to get good at.
I love it.
Yeah.
I was sharing a great book. We're going to talk about Rick's book in a second, but I was sharing a book that, like, when I was early on, a book that somebody gave me was Don't Send a Duck to Eagle School. And it was all about the importance of recruiting, right? It tells it in a very funny story, and it talks about hiring a duck and spending your whole life trying to make the duck an eagle, and the duck will never be an eagle. So just hire an eagle, don't hire a duck. Um, but it really was stressing the importance of getting that hire right.
Yeah.
Um, with a company like Higher Power, you guys focus on that, especially for startups where money's tight. They can't just, hire a bunch of people. They have to make really strategic hires
Yeah.
at the right time, and they have to get the right people in those positions. Maybe talk a little bit about first, before we talk about the book, talk a little bit maybe about what your company does to help there.
Yeah, so my search firm is Stride, and we actually work with
Yeah.
startups and we help them put an interview process in place. We coach them up on how to conduct an interview, and then we help them find people. So we're kind of like a executive search firm on steroids because we've developed a hiring process that we can plug into the business. And the value add is that we actually build that hiring process around that company's core values. So it actually has a lot more stickiness to the hires once you bring people in. Um, so we help. You know, there's a lot of like education that we kind of put into this and in training into our clients just to get people really comfortable with trying to gather evidence in an interview rather than
Mm-hmm.
going after things like, well, I liked him or her, and I can't tell you how many CEOs or even venture capitalists have said to me, at the end of the day, it just comes down to, whether or not I want to have a beer with the person, which that is not the best thing for the company.
Yeah.
You might like that person. I once had a CEO that spent 45 minutes with a VP in an interview, and all they talked about was the Oakland A's. And I'm like, well, okay, great. Tell me about how the interview went. Oh, it was great. We want to hire him. Okay, why? I don't know. We just talked about baseball for 45 minutes. Are you running a business here? Like, you know,
That's
it was
awesome.
scary to me. It was scary to me. But and I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that we don't know. We don't know how to construct an interview that's going to be effective and gather evidence to support a yes or no answer. It's just kind of this nebulous. Do I like you? Do I not like you? If I don't like you, then I'm going to try and figure out, like, I'm going to try and confirm the fact that I don't like you. I'm going to look for more evidence to support that. And if I do like you, I'm just going to start selling you. And it's a really dangerous place to be, especially if you're trying to build a company.
I love it. We had a guest on, and she talked about millennials becoming managers and like their first manager role, and the fact that there's no training book, right? You
No.
become a leader, a manager, an entrepreneur, a startup owner. And nobody hands you the book and goes, "This is exactly what you need to do, and good luck, and you'll be successful." Right? You're kind of like figuring it out along the way. So I love the idea of how you guys kind of help them, because oftentimes, they have a brilliant idea, and they're passionate about that, but they're not passionate about leadership or running a
No.
company or hiring or interviewing. And oftentimes that one-on-one discussion, right? People can speak great in front of a group, but I found when they get in that one-on-one, it becomes really awkward. It's a totally different skill set to be good at interviewing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on the person too. I mean, some people are great one-on-ones. I mean, if you're hiring engineers, you probably want to do it one-on-one. If you're, some people do great in a group setting. If you're hiring salespeople, you can run it
Mhm.
as a group. But, I found that when you take engineers and you put them into a panel situation, man, a lot of them panic and fail and have a really hard time with it. It just depends on, again, the individual, right?
Yep.
And you really want to make the interview a place where you're extracting or you're getting to the truth of who that human is that's across the desk from you.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing about an interview is, who is this person, and are we good for this person? Is this good person good for the business? And that's really the only questions you really have to answer.
I love
And
it.
if they're not, great, you move on. And if they are, then hey, let's get you on board.
It's amazing to me when I do interviews, I usually say like, tell me your story, right? Which is just giving them a free canvas, right? To tell me why they're great or why they'd be a good fit, or to tell me something awesome about their story. And so many people like that. They're like, can you ask me a specific question? No, I'm giving you. I want to see how you paint your picture, of yourself. I want you to take some creative and sometimes those open questions really kind of throw people for a loop. Like they don't have an elevator pitch about themselves. And it's
You'll
just
find
kind
that
of,
most people don't actually. Most
yeah,
people don't. It's like it's not comfortable for a lot of people, especially introverts, right? Like we're not going to talk
right.
about ourselves. I happen to be an introvert with just like
Wow.
maybe multiple personalities. I don't know.
I love it. I would have never in a million years
Yeah,
guessed
I
you
tend
were
to
an
be a lot more
introvert.
introverted. I mean, I've always been like more. I've considered myself like a shark, right? Like I kind of swim
Yeah,
underneath the surface. I come up and bite, and then I go back under.
that's
So,
awesome.
but it's one of those things where you know there are people that will resonate with you and be able to tell you a story, but a lot of people, like in different types of scenarios, they're not going to be comfortable with that because um, they just don't. They feel like maybe it's self promotion or
Mm,
they're uncomfortable with that. A good way to get around that, to make that question a really like to make that experience really rich, is to actually give the person the question before they come in. You know, give them a quick preparation. Like when
yeah,
we give people interviews, we actually send them the interview questions so they can prep for the interview,
nice.
because it gives them the opportunity to either shine or crash and burn.
Yeah,
We gave you the questions. You're going to tell me you can't answer it, so you didn't prepare for it. Thank you so much.
yeah. Have
Nice
a
to
nice
have you
day.
here. And if they prepare for it and they nail it, then great. It gives you a really good
Yeah,
outlook on who this person is and what they do.
I love it. So you wrote a book, which the title is just really appealing, right? I think all of us, right? In a senior level in my career, and I've been at it for a while, and I have career wounds, right? And so when you're like healing career wounds, I'm like, ooh, what's that book about? Because I think all of us do, right? Either we had a bad boss, or we worked for a bad place, or we made a wrong choice, or something didn't go as well, and we left a job going, "Ooh, that just kind of smarts." So, talk to me a little bit about what is healing career wounds, because I might need the therapy.
Yeah, totally. It sounds like it's a book for candidates that are looking for jobs, but it's actually the punchline, right? So, in today's market and in this environment that we have where it's really hard to find good people, and the good people are getting like these huge salaries and everything else, the answer to this is that you need to find an alternative route to get somebody engaged to want to work for your company. And the answer is healing their career wounds. Everybody has them, right? So if you can actually connect the dots for that person in their brain that, hey, this opportunity may not pay as much as some large company or another competitor, but I'm able to help you check off all these boxes, and I'll be able to get you to where you want to go in your career. Now, when you can do that, that's far more powerful than a paycheck, and that's how you win today. And if you can't do it, you have to be honest. You're not going to try and sell somebody on something you can't give them. But when you can, that creates such a strong bond between the person you're hiring and your company, and creates lasting engagement.
I love it so much. We're a mid-sized consulting firm, right? 150 people, and oftentimes we're competing against E&Y, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, right? These guys are all throwing stupid money around at people. Stupid. There's no way that resource will ever become profitable for them. It is just bad business, and they're throwing these crazy salaries around, and these people go chase the dollar, and then they're miserable, right?
Yep.
The amount of people that apply for any position that we post looking to get out of these big firms, right? And you're spot on when we're like, hey, here's what our culture is. Here's how we develop you and nurture you and invest in you and build you so that you can be successful in those big firms. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. That's exactly what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
because I joined this big firm and I was overwhelmed. I hate my job. Nobody invests in me. Nobody cares. Um, that what you said about healing career wounds makes total sense, right? On how we compete against oftentimes 100% greater salary that these bigger firms are throwing around.
Yeah, and like we recruit for startups, right? And I come up to um, in competition with Google and Facebook and Amazon and all these big players, and I know that if I go paycheck to paycheck, I'm not going to win.
Mm-mm.
And so I just figured out a long time. Number one, I'm a terrible loser, so I just I can't for the life of me uh, like let somebody beat me to the punch on that sort of thing. But like again, I just learned that if we can do better in the interview process in providing value to that candidate, to that person who's looking to make the switch, it creates such a win-win scenario that it doesn't matter if Google comes in, $50,000 more on salary. The person just they know what's happening, and they just don't see the value in joining. That's the only way you can win.
Right. There's a lot of excitement, right, around a startup environment. A lot of people haven't had the opportunity to work in that environment, but
Yeah.
um, folks that thrive on that energy, it's just different. It's hard to put it into words, but there's so much going on, right? Whether you're day one trying to figure out the product and get the product ready for launch, or you're further into it and you're looking for series funding and such. There's just so many aspects. It's such a cool place. I always say everybody should work for a big company and everybody should have an opportunity to work for a small company, because
I
at a
don't know if I'd
small
agree with that, just from the perspective, like, I don't think a lot of people have it in their DNA to work for a small company, and I think, on the advert, like people who have just been in startups, I don't have, they think they have the DNA to go work at a large company. Like if you put
sure.
me at an Amazon, God, I mean, if I had hair, it would be gone. I'd pull it out.
I love it. Yeah, it probably works better big to small than it does that startup mentality going into the bigger companies. I,
Sometimes I think I kind of look at people as being, look, if you're a startup, you need people who are builders in the very
mm-hmm,
beginning, people who are super scrappy, who can do a lot with very little,
mm-hmm,
and somebody who comes out of a large company and they've been there for a long time and they're used to having plenty of resources and tons of people to play for. They struggle a lot of times, and those have resulted a lot of times in bad hires.
yep. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So as you develop the HireOS and you're developing kind of your content and such for your company, your book, your thought leadership, you've chosen really the startup niche to kind of focus on. Why
Yeah.
versus helping HR companies be better?
Because startups are my people. Like I feel like I've been around startups my whole career, and I've seen so many uh, I've seen quite a few succeed, but I've seen so many fail,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been close enough to the business, from the outside, that I've been able to see all these mistakes that people have made, and um, it's just and here's the other thing: there's not a lot of support for entrepreneurs and startups. There just really isn't. Everybody's chasing the big enterprise dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So why not help spur innovation? Why not help the companies that really need it and get them to a point where, like, I'm a big David and Goliath fan, right? Like, so when David could beat Goliath, then we've got some great wins, and great things happen from smaller companies. I'm so biased. I just love startups. That's
Yeah.
really what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's definitely we have a lot of folks that are what I'd call founders, right? They found a company, they started it, they're developing it, and we get to guest them an awful lot, and their stories are cool. And somebody said, they said, "Man, you host all these really cool guests, these entrepreneurs, these founders. What's a one thing that they all have in common?" And I really thought about that and I summarize it as hustle, right? They're all just like, they believe so passionately in what it is that they're doing that
Yeah.
they're hustling to make it happen.
Yeah, I think there's a quote, I forgot who said it, but like, being a startup founder is like, you got to get really comfortable with the taste of your own blood. Like it's like chewing glass, right? Like,
I love it.
yeah,
The some people, I think, when they think of HR or hiring, they're like, oh, I just get a software, right? I sign up for Taleo or one of these, anytime you type recruiting, all the software systems come up. That's what
yeah.
kind of comes up on Google, and people trying to sell you software and telling you like, oh, if you just buy software, everything is great. Or Indeed, right? All you need to do is post these positions on Indeed and
And you get
magic
an
will rain
inbox
from
full
the
of
sky.
unicorns.
Yeah, yeah, magic will rain from the sky because you're on Indeed, or
And by the way, I'm going to call bullshit on all those.
please, yeah.
Yeah. Unicorns don't look for jobs. Like they usually get pulled from one company to another. Like I don't think I know so many people that are A players, and I don't think one of them has ever posted their resume anywhere.
Mhm.
You know?
I love it. I used to say, um, in about 20 years, I had never applied for a job,
Yeah,
right? I moved companies, I moved around, but I was recruited, right? I
yeah,
didn't go out looking. Somebody came to me and said, oh my God, here's an amazing opportunity for both you and this company. We think, this would be great. And I've been like, oh, let me check it out. And off I go, which has been a blessing, that I haven't had to go figure out all this, HR Indeed nonsense.
yeah.
Uh, but what do you guys do that's like different than somebody just like saying, "Oh, I'm just going to go sign up for Indeed."
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, the basic recruiting premise is that if you throw enough shit at the wall, something's going to stick. Like that's really all the tools are built for that model, right? So
Yeah,
everything from Indeed to the ATS systems, everything is just about managing the process, um, and getting people in the funnel, right?
yeah,
But the opposite, I mean, what's really like most effective is that if you reverse your funnel, if you flip your funnel and just trickle in key people here and there and just start building strategically and having a proactive recruiting process, then you don't have all these problems that everybody else has right now. Like, I'm part of EO. I get exposure to a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are talking about how I just can't find people who are qualified. I can't find people out there. I'm like, you guys are fishing in the wrong ponds.
hmm.
That's really what it boils down to. If you're trying to fish for tuna in a pond, you're never going to catch one. You got to go to the ocean,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, so um, so what we do is actually middle of the funnel, right? So the big glowing problem that we all have with hiring is that when two people go into a room together for an interview, nobody knows what happens. And
true.
there's no training for hiring managers on, okay, this is your interview script, this is what you need to ask this person. It's don't say this, don't say that, don't get us in trouble from a legal perspective, and good luck,
Yeah,
right?
you're
So
spot on.
it's trial by fire, right? It's that same as that management mentality. You're a great performer. You should be a manager. Good luck. So, and by the way, that's what I got when I became a manager too. And I failed miserably at that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a different
for
skill set.
for a while, yeah, absolutely. Um, so the interview itself is the most critical element of whether or not you're going to be able to attract the right people. And if you don't teach your people how to interview, if you don't have an actual process in place that is structured, that everybody adheres to, and if it's just treated like, well, hey, we'll just pull in Jane over here and Sal over here, and they don't have any time, they have time on their calendar right now, just go talk to this person. Um, when you have a lackadaisical interview process, that's the result that you're going to get. You're not going to be able to attract the top performers because they're gonna go after the money, or they're gonna go after another place that really does a good job of
Hmm.
of healing their career wounds, right? Putting them in a place where they're going to excel and thrive.
I
So
love it.
what do we end up hiring? We 50% of the time you're gonna hire a, a mediocre candidate.
to to hear you say it, it sounds so simple, right?
Yeah,
But in 25 years, I mean, that's the process I've seen, right?
yeah, I
That's what
know.
people do everywhere.
Yeah,
Is they just, I always ask one question in HR. All the recruiters are like, "Don't ask that question. That's a dumb question." I'm like, but it tells me
what
so
question is
much
it?
about that person. Now I'm going to share my secret question, and pretty soon it's going to become
Come
a
on, you got to do.
national. It's going to be
I'll
a
share one of
national
mine.
standard. Everyone's going to ask it. So I always, male or female, regardless of the position, right? And it's okay, yes or no, right? If they don't do it, I always say, do you game? Right? Do you video game? Do you computer game, console game? And almost all kind of the younger generation that we tend to hire are all like, oh yeah, maybe they phone game, maybe they, and then so then I follow on. Is that, are you a phone gamer, PC gamer, or console gamer? And they respond, and then I'm always like, when's the last time that you just played a game to completion, right? Like that you took it all the way. And sometimes I'll get these people and they'll be like, man, I bought Red Dead Redemption. I stayed up for 3 days. There was no way that game was going to beat me. I killed that game. And then I took it back to GameStop and I returned it and I got like 95% of my money back. It was awesome. I'm like, dude, uh, I'm dialed in on you, right? Like that's somebody who will not quit till they solve a problem. They
Oh, so
understand.
you're actually evaluating them then for resilience and persistence
Yeah,
and, and yeah. So that's a really good way of. So you have something that you're evaluating them against that's relevant to the business. That's brilliant. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're the first recruiting professional to ever say that my question was brilliant. Most of them are like, you can't ask them that. What if they say they don't game? No harm, no foul, right? Not everybody's a
So,
gamer. That's
so
okay.
do they recommend that you just walk in and go, so where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah, yeah. Tell me why you're interested in. Yeah,
Yeah, why do you want to work here? Why don't you ask dumb questions that they're already prepared to answer,
I
right?
love it.
Why
Yeah,
don't you ask dumb questions that essentially the last 8 companies that the person interview with has asked them? And there's nothing more that turns off good people too than going to an interview at a company and let's say you're interviewing with 5 people, the same 5 people ask you the same question.
oh yeah, yeah.
I mean,
That's crazy.
if you want to kill an interview, go for it. Keep doing it.
I appreciate the candidates. If you Google my name, right, all kinds of stuff comes up. My LinkedIn comes up. I have all kinds of interesting things about me, right? My wife and I run a YouTube channel. That's out there. People will see all kinds of interesting things. They'll find my podcast. So whenever I interview, if people are like, "Oh, I like this, and I saw that you do this and that and the other," I value that too, right? Like that's cool. I took time to read your resume and Google you and try to understand your story. You took time to do the same for mine. So we're on a much higher playing field when then we can get past the where did you go to college? I hate
Walk
that.
me
Like
walk me through your resume. Like
I can't
that's
stand.
yeah, right. I mean, I want to encourage my competitors to always ask those questions. Quite frankly,
I love it. I love it. So
you
you
make my job easier.
I know. When you mentioned it briefly when we started, but like, talk to me about how hiring should be tied to the company values. Like, I know our company values are near and dear to our heart. We don't just say it, we live it, we breathe it, we hold each other accountable to it. Our culture is derived from it. We call ourselves a pirate ship, right? We have a lot of fun. We work hard, play hard. We always say work like a captain, play like a pirate.
Nice.
And it's in everything that we do. Um, but how important is that hire to corporate values?
So if you want your hires to stick, if you think about every person that was a bad hire to you, if you really drill down and think about it, the reason why they weren't successful is because they didn't align with the core values of the company. I mean, at its root, they might have actually been able to show that they had the skills, but then they came in, they were, who knows what they didn't resonate with or what turned them off, but something happened, something triggered that made them think like, I don't want to work here. And then it became a spiraling downhill,
Hmm.
scenario, right? So, um, values I think are critical. And if you look at the most successful company in the United States, Amazon, they've done this from day one. They've always interviewed for core values, their leadership principles, and they evaluate you against those leadership principles. And 80% of the hiring decision, something like 70 to 80% of the hiring decision, is based on whether or not you live those values. If you don't live those values and you have all the skills, they don't hire you. So arguably, there's no better example out there to say, hey, look at, I
Hmm.
mean, that they're critical, because when you bring people on board who do align with it, then guess what? Now you've got a scenario where you're stacking the deck with really, really strong people. And that's as business, that's all you want to do. I mean, you want to be able to sleep at night. And, most of the reasons why we can't sleep at night is because we've got the wrong people on the bus.
Hmm. I love the bus analogy. I
Yeah.
tell my team all the time, hey, the bus is going downtown, right? Along
But
the
you're a
way,
boat, right? You guys are a boat, not a
we're a
bus.
boat. We're a
Yeah.
boat. My team's a bus. We're a bus on a boat. The boat's big enough that it can have a bus. We it's such a cool analogy because I always say my role is to really communicate the vision and the direction, right? And then people need to feel communicated to, and they also need to make the decision of, is that where I want to go? Do I
Yeah.
want to go downtown or did I want to go to the beach? And if you want to go to the beach, well, we're going downtown. So
Yeah.
at some point you might need to opt off, and you can go find your path to the beach. So.
That is very true. And the way in which you tie your values to the interview process, and again, I borrowed a page from Amazon, is that you build out behavioral questions that unearth evidence to support whether or not somebody actually lives those values.
Hmm.
And it's a different way of thinking, it's a different way of connecting or conducting an interview, but it brings so much value to both the person interviewing, because they're getting a completely different experience than everybody else, and it's elevating your brand value in their mind, because you're not asking where you want to be in 5 years and walk me through your resume and all those no-brainer questions that nobody
Yeah.
really wants to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that like line of questioning, right? Helping people tie to their company values. Is that kind of what HireOS is?
Yeah.
Um, cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a bit more to it. It's pretty robust, but yeah, the idea is that um, make it smart proof, meaning like let's make a interview process and an interview experience that um, that is actually evaluating people for things that matter within the organization, other than your ego or your personal bias or personal motives or whatever, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I can't even. I mean, I can go through examples all day long of, oh my god, this person went to this school. We got to hire him. I'm like, that doesn't mean the person's going to be good.
Yeah. Or they like the same baseball team, like the Oakland A's.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. I mean, commonalities are good for chit chat, right? I
they
interviewed
are.
somebody just the other day who went to the same alma mater that I went to, go Sun Devils, right? And I was like, "Oh, cool, ASU, did you do this? Oh, yeah, I did that." But it was like an introduction, getting to know each other. It wasn't really an interview question. um, of course, if they don't really understand the college, and they're like, "Well, I just, that those all kinds of red flags and come there too." But um, I, I totally love the fact that you help people, because I will personally admit I am not the best interviewer. I have a couple cool questions that I like to ask that really tell me a couple things. I totally love tying it back to our values. As a leadership team, we were just talking about that. We're like, oh, here's our 6 values. We should really make sure that we not only hire people according to those values and kind of align to it, but we continue to develop people along those values, right? How do
Yeah.
we help them grow in those values? If we're going to say we have these corporate values, then we have to demonstrate those values in every aspect of our business.
Yeah, you definitely have to make it a language and make it something that people make decisions by, right? And then, of course, that does filter down to the interview process, right? Because if again, I've we've yet to have like in the past 7.5, 8 years, like we haven't
Wow.
really made a bad hire at any of our clients because we've gotten people so tuned in that we're so in alignment with the organizational values. Now we usually go in, we have to build those from scratch a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you guys have them now. All you have to do is just create questions in and around it, and then and structure and and just teach people on how to ask a behavioral question and then how to extract data out of it.
I love it. So if an entrepreneur, right, is starting up, and we've established that hiring is really important to companies with little money as they're starting. Um,
It's the most critical then.
yeah. Let's not waste the money on bad hires. Um, so HireOS, right? They go, okay, I'm interested. Like, what does that process look like for them, and what do they kind of come away with?
So we're actually building out a software as a service platform right now as you speak. So it hasn't launched yet. We're we're probably about 5, 6 months out before we're going to be releasing it. But basically, it's going to essentially allow you to build all the structural components and then run the whole interview from start to finish through the platform. The other thing is, everybody talks about scorecards. Like I rank this person a 5 or 4, or whatever. Eliminating scorecards or it like here's the thing: it's either a hell yes or it's a no, and that's the way it should be, and it should be based on evidence.
I feel like I'm failing as I'm talking to Rick. I'm like,
Well,
the joke
well, we
in
we talk ourselves into hires
yeah,
a lot of times, right?
yeah, the joke at RPI is Michael likes everybody, right? Which is true. So I'll
Yeah.
come out of an interview and I'll find something, a few things that I like about a person, and I'm like, yeah, they'd be okay or they'd be great. And then I wind up at the end, maybe I talked to 8 or 9 candidates. I wind up going, oh, I marked them all fours. Now what? Right?
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, you come away from some of them and you go, hell, man, this dude is badass. And you give him four because you're like, nobody can maybe be a five, but this guy's great. And this person I marked a four, but when you compare the two, you're like, yeah, no, not compared to this guy. This guy's gold standard. This person, they're great, but they're
Yeah.
not. They're not the best. Therefore, they're a no. I love what you said. Right?
Yeah.
They're either a hell yes or they're a no.
Yep. Yeah. What that's that. I mean, make things easy on yourself. There's also a tendency for us to compare and contrast. We want to see more candidates so we can see like what's out there, right? Um, can you imagine if you told your wife that, like when you were dating? I
You're wonderful, but I just need to like explore a little bit
need to
more.
see what else is out there, right?
If you could just hang out here while I go date a bunch of other women, and then maybe I'm going to come back to you.
But
Yeah.
that's really like that's what we do. It's crazy to me sometimes. I mean, you should evaluate each person based on their merit that they bring to the table and make a decision quickly. If you can't make a decision, like if you've got two people coming in the same week, okay, you give transparency and you let both people know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But you should evaluate each person on their individual merit and be able to like walk them out of the interview with either a yes or a no. um, you probably should be the last person that interviews your people,
Hmm.
and it should be just a confirmation based on the evidence that your other people support or bring to
Yeah.
you, right?
I have a story where I overrode. They had decided on this person, and I'm sure she would have been fine. Um, and we had turned down a bunch of people, right? And then we got this person who we turned down, who I had interviewed, but the team had decided this other person was going to get the job. Sent me. just the most professional LinkedIn message I've probably ever received. Really thanked me for taking the time, listed off a bunch of reasons that they really liked me, the company, the job. Um, Asked if I'd be interested in doing a mentorship relationship as they continue to try to develop to be a great candidate. It was just an amazing LinkedIn interaction that I had. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, okay, that's a differentiator, right?
Yeah.
Like to me, I just immediately pivoted and I was like, okay, that person might not have gotten the team's nod, but that was a strong finish that just kind of overtook it. Maybe you could share a story of some of the companies or a company that you helped with the HireOS system be have a success story.
Oh yeah, we got tons of them. Well, actually, just recently, we were helping out one of our clients who's a fiber optic company. They do connectors and wire harnesses for fiber optic cables.
Okay.
And yeah, we had a really tough position. Um, and they had some values, and we went in and we helped them build it out. What we did is we kind of build out their values to a point where like there's measurables that attach to it, um, and evaluator points, right? So that we know, hey, look at, is this somebody who lives these values, and to what degree, right? Um, so we built out the values, then we take that language, we build that into a job description. Then we also build the interview questions around those measurables. And then from there, we basically, as we're running the search,
Mm-hmm.
we're training the executive staff on how to run the interview process. And we look at the interview process as like the most valuable, like where you spend the most. You want to spend as much time up front and as little at the end, right? So your very first phone call where people call up and go, "Hey, I got your resume. How much you looking to make, and how many years of this do you have?" That 5 minute call, which is by far the biggest waste of time you'll ever do in your life. um, we flip that and we spend about 45 minutes on a call with like each person who's qualified,
Wow.
getting some really in-depth detail as to whether or not they're positioned right for our organization, one, and then two, we want to know how good they are. So we have them walk us through a actual project, step by step, right? So we want to know how much impact
Wow.
they've actually brought into their business outside of their current job. And so, we typically do that on our end. We do the discovery call when we recruit people, and then we hand it off to our managers and we bring them through the process. Um, you know, it was it's always challenging when you're teaching somebody to do an interview based on interview questions that you give them, because everybody's used to doing their own thing. Like it's the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoy my Burger King interview that I give everybody. Yeah.
And then there's this crazy guy who asks video game questions.
Well, as long as they're tied to something, they have purpose, right? And then that's
Yeah,
why I said it's a good question.
I love it.
Um, but then, then you got to teach people how to do a behavioral question, because behavioral questions aren't just, hey, tell me about a time somebody asked you to lie. It's, so then somebody tells you about a time somebody asked you to lie, and then you're digging deeper and you're trying to understand, like, well, how did you feel about that? Why did what made you feel that way? um, what made you do that response? And you're having these conversations that are going really deep on how they reacted, how they like what happened internally, and how they reacted to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're taking that data, and it becomes a very clear, like, oh, this person's a yes, or ooh, not so much, right?
Right.
um, always, everybody wants to put integrity as one of their values, which is always kind of a tricky one. And I always laugh because I'm like, Enron's number one value is integrity. Do,
Oh man.
but how do you evaluate for it, right? So then you got to figure out, like, what does integrity really mean, and then how does that lay out? And then so yeah, we kind of went through, we got everybody trained up. It just so worked out that we kind of finished up training, and we had two candidates that we presented to him. Um, First one wasn't such a match. Second one was like a spot on rock star. And, we ran them through the process, and it was kind of funny. We always go kind of, last week on my podcast, I had a guy named Steve Newcomb on my podcast, and he came up with this concept of hire slow, fire slow, right? And the premise is don't hire, don't, you don't need to fire people if you hire right, right? And so, we kind of kept them on pace, kept it slow, but we moved the process along. And at the end of the process, it's a very easy, so what do you want to do, candidate? Oh, I definitely want to work here. Boom. And then next thing you know, you know, it's a very easy yes. And then you don't have to deal with things like, counter offers or, well, I've
Yeah,
got 14 other companies that, that may be making me an offer right now. So I want to wait and see what they do. Right.
I love it. It all ties back to really the healing career wounds, right?
Yeah.
How do you differentiate, which I think we're all trying to figure out in this marketplace. But I, to me, just talking to you, I was like, man, that makes total sense, right? We just need to we need to heal their career wounds, and I've never thought about it in that context, but after hearing you say it, I'm like, yes, that's how we can compete. That's how we can be
Yeah.
different. It makes 100% sense. And then as we're interviewing candidates, from these bigger firms that are trying to get the hell out of there, I'm like, they just got a career wound, right? And now we're going to heal that by our
Well,
culture
you also got to
and
get
who
them
we
to tell
are.
you what those career wounds are, right? Like, so that's why that discovery call is so important.
Right.
Like, when we do a discovery call, we don't pitch the job or the company or any of that until the end of the phone call. So what we do is we extract, like we try to understand the human that's on the, on the Zoom or the phone call across it. And it's like, what's important to you?
I
And
love
so
it.
we basically just open up a conversation and let them tell us what their career wound is. They let them tell us what it is they really want to do. And people will share that with you all day long because guess what? Nobody asks it.
Yeah.
Nobody does. So you have these really rich conversations, and and listen, and people will tell you like, hey, look at I want to somebody might say I'm working at Accenture right now. I want to go to YP. I want to go to a different big firm. Well, okay, great, but I'm a small firm, so we don't even need to talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What you want is where you're going to thrive, and if I don't kind of resonate with that, then you're not going to be a good fit for here.
Yeah.
So, people give you all this information really easily if you ask.
I love it.
Yeah, it just gets us out of sales mode too, because usually, you know, I was taught how to recruit, which was, learn all about your company and pitch it really well. And I'm like, so as I thought about it, I'm like, I just wore people down.
Yeah. Yeah. I much prefer your approach than the standard
Yeah.
sell the position approach. It makes a lot more sense. You mentioned the higher power radio show, which is not higher like the higher power, but higher like HIRE,
Yep.
um, and, which is really cool. As I am cyber stalking Rick on his higher power show, he has some really cool guests on there, and you guys talk about uh, really relevant things like why do people leave, right? Which is something in the great in the great whatever we're calling it now. We were calling it the Great Resignation, and I think everyone was like, "Ooh, that's bad. Let's call it something else." The Great Career Transition, and we have to come up with some fuzzy HR word for it.
Well, I was
Um,
calling it the great fuck you, but
yeah, well, yeah, that's kind of what it is, right? Everybody's like, "You will not treat me like this. I'm going somewhere else."
that's really what it
Uh,
was. Yeah.
well, and I think it's going to continue, right? As a lot of these companies do something that I think is the stupidest thing they could possibly do, which is mandate people to come back to work after we've proven that people are very successful working remotely and very effective, and the whole world went remote. And now you have companies going, "You will come back to this overpriced office space that we are paying for, and you will slave away here and drive an hour each way." And I think employees are going to go, "You're going to do that. I'm going to go somewhere else.
They've been doing it, and they're going to continue to do it. The other thing that's happening too is I think a lot of people last year jumped ship from one crappy company, and then they went after the money because everybody's in a feeding frenzy. And then they
Hmm.
went to another crappy company, and now they're realizing, yeah, I should probably go find something that's a little bit more in alignment with what I want out of my career. So now is a really good time to be hitting those people up and saying, hey, look at, I might have something that resonates with what you're looking for.
I love it.
Yeah, especially if you had people last year that you might have missed out on. It's a great time to call them.
I, Good advice.
Nice.
Um, well, Rick, you've shared a bunch about the difference, the importance of hiring and doing it a little bit differently to find the right people. I love your approach. The book Healing Career Wounds. The link will be down below. Very very cool approach to recruiting. HireOS. I think anybody who's looking for some help there, around being a better going through a better process of finding the candidate, that plug and play kind of approach to it will help. I'm excited to see this SaaS offering.
Yeah.
If you need
So am I.
any
This is a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work.
I
I've
love
been
it.
eating glass now for 6 months.
It's coming. It's coming. Believe
It's
in it.
coming.
It's going to
Yeah.
be great. That's awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time and adding some energy and some humor to otherwise what could have been just like, oh, hiring, yawn.
A boring HR podcast. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So it makes
like
me want to go over and check out Higher Power Radio and see how some of those go. You've got some really cool topics out there. So again, those links will be down below. Feel free to check Rick out there. Get his book. That'll be down below. His firm will be down below. I don't know what else will be down below. I'll have to put something else down there.
a
Maybe I'll look up
submarine or something.
his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu titles and stuff, and I'll put those down there too because that'll be cool. Um, that's
Nice.
awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thanks,
and
Rick,
actually,
for
the
taking
book,
the
if I
time.
can just give like a little thing on
Yeah,
the book
please.
is actually a blueprint that you can plug into your business. So it's got everything down to the scripts, and it's a fairly fast read. I wrote it from the perspective like I just want to be super impactful. There's not a whole lot of stories that are like irrelevant. It's all about like, hey, here's how you drill down and create an interview process that you guys can win, and that's
I love
that's
it.
that's kind of the idea behind it. I want to be able to like again my passion for startups, right? I want to be able to like have every startup succeed.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
most of them don't, and most of it's because they don't get help, right? And they don't look for someone like yourself, right, that has a way that they could be more successful. It's something so critical as hiring, right?
yeah,
Startups often have great ideas or they have a great product, and the person's so passionate about that the aspect of running a business becomes secondary. But the problem with that is running a business is what's critical to that product or
yeah,
whatever they're passionate about being successful. So
yeah.
it's good to go get help on the business side to make sure that you're successful with whatever you're entrepreneuring.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, like I always think that like if you just get good, if you have to get good at one really like important thing outside of the product and all the other things you have to do, just get really good at hiring people. I mean,
mhm.
that's the one thing that's going to make or break your business.
What do they always say? Surround yourself with people that have the skills that you don't have, or and that's all about hiring, right? It's all about
Yeah.
getting finding those people for the positions that the company needs at the right time, and finding the right people to do that. So
Yeah. Well, Michael,
very
thanks so
cool.
much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, this has been great. I again appreciate the energy that you bring to this topic, and kind of all you're doing, man. Startups are it's tough, like you said. I love the analogy of eating glass. For someone to say, "Hey, I can help while you're eating glass. Break me off a piece of that."
Yeah, I'll
Um,
chew on that glass with you, baby. Let's go.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Rick. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.